Yes, I'm with Alan Collins again, and we're in Jersey for the start of the independent care inquiry. But before we mention that, how many residual cases have you got yet to be resolved on the compensation scheme?
Half a dozen, and hopefully we're getting towards the end.
Is it important that they should be resolved before this inquiry gets underway, or is it not really important?
I don't think it makes any difference now.
Well, as the inquiry, it was the initial hearing today. What did you make of it?
Well, it was very interesting, and the terms of reference appear to be extremely thorough, and so that's welcome. What I'm going to be interested in seeing is how the mechanics work, because the Committee of Inquiry is going to be very dependent, it seems to me, on a very large number of potential witnesses coming forward, whether that's victims, alleged victims, former members of staff, police officers, and so on. And that is the only way, I think, that the terms of reference can be thoroughly followed through.
There could be many hundreds of potential witnesses, but it's contacting them, isn't it? That's the first thing. I mean, obviously a lot of them haven't been involved in making complaints. They're all over the world.
Indeed. And they've got to be made aware that the inquiry is now up and running. It's also got to be explained to them why they should participate, and they are going to have, I suspect, some very searching questions, because victims, alleged victims, other witnesses are going to be asking themselves, okay, if I come forward, are there going to be any repercussions for me? What are the implications? Is it going to be worthwhile? Is this committee actually going to be worthwhile? So those are very understandable and natural questions, and it's very difficult at the moment to see how those questions actually are going to be answered.
There are other more famous celebrity trials going on. Presumably witnesses can come forward from those cases, can they, for this, and present themselves before this inquiry?
Well, there's potentially a crossover, so yes, I see no reason why that should not happen in theory.
The similarity of this inquiry now taking place with other inquiries up and down the country in different places, the way it's being set up, have you got any comments on that, the way it looks to be headed?
What I'm curious and maybe concerned about is the necessity for very important witnesses to come forward. What happens if they don't? And if they did come forward, what the ability is to ask them questions and follow-up questions. Many of the victims that I've represented are very anxious to ensure that if this committee is to succeed, for them that means the truth coming out, the full truth. But to get to that, you have got potentially very key witnesses coming forward and being asked quite searching questions, and if that doesn't happen, then there's going to be a question mark from the victim's perspective as to whether or not the truth has in fact been properly established.
Even with known witnesses, and you represent, I forget, 60 or so?
59.
There are a lot of people potentially can be witnesses. What's your role now going to be for them? Because they were talking about legal representation today, but it was a little bit vague.
It is very vague from my perspective, as it were, because I've got to go back and report to the victims what has been said today. They are going to want to know what legal representation means. Many of them, I know, would be very reluctant to give evidence without my being there to safeguard their interests. Indeed, probably would refuse to give evidence from what they're telling me unless I was there to safeguard their interests. And it comes back to this question: are the mechanics there to ensure that this
They
is
were
going
only
to be-
talking today about witnesses being physically present before the panel. They weren't talking about people sending in signed statements. So presumably you have to be physically there. Is that your understanding?
Well, I think that's what has to happen, because I think that's the only way that the full story is going to come out and be scrutinised, because I think it's important that the accounts are scrutinised and questions are asked to ensure that scrutinisation
But even
is
that
thorough.
process of questioning was a little bit weird, wasn't it? Because the questions had to be pre-submitted, and the counsel for the panel would be doing the questions, and if they didn't think of the right questions, they wouldn't get asked, if I can express it that way.
If it transpires that that's the way it's going to be, then I suspect many victims, as potential witnesses, are not going to be happy about that, because the risk from their perspective is that the full story will not come out and that there will be insufficient scrutinisation. Now the committee may say, no, those concerns are entirely misplaced, but I'm speaking from the experience of representing these victims over the last 6 years, and I know what their concerns are and what their opinions are. And I think that is going to be a big issue.
And I wonder how they would deal with conflicts of evidence that come up, because obviously person A says one thing, person B says something.
Comes back to this scrutinisation process,
does, doesn't
because you do need questions asked and you need follow-up questions. Okay, apparently no cross-examination, but you have got to test the testimony.
There was mention of lawyers' fees. If you're an accredited lawyer, and only if you're an accredited lawyer for which you have to be registered, there's the potential for you to get paid. When I previously spoke to you, you hadn't received a penny so far from your efforts in Jersey.
Well, yeah, it's call a spade a spade. If for argument's sake we did get involved in representing victims in some capacity or another, then it's going to be a very time-consuming exercise, and yes, my firm would have to be paid for its services.
And you presumably need that agreement up front. I mean, you can't embark upon it.
Everyone needs to know exactly where they stand, whether it's me, the victims, other witnesses. People need to know where they stand on these issues.
There's 4 or 5 lawyers sitting on the panel's panel, or assisting the panel, Eversheds and different lawyers. I presume they will be very expensive. Presumably their fees are all guaranteed and up front, are they?
I don't know, but I assume that that's all been agreed by those who've arranged all of this, so I would imagine so. I don't know the details, but I suspect that's all been agreed and worked out.
Again, there's a lot of protocols and stuff which we have to go away and read to understand this situation. But people are supposed to register within 14 days, which isn't long for a lot of people to register, is it?
Well, yeah, people have got to get their skates on, There's a lot to do in the next 14 days if things are going to happen.
Are these sort of decisions that your firm will have to take, or is it down to you entirely for you to decide?
I'm the lawyer that's been dealing with this for the last 6 years, and my job is going to be to advise the clients as to what's been said today, what's in the protocol, what the terms are, and so on. And they have got to decide what they want to do. Hopefully I'm in a position to enable them to make an informed decision about yes or no.
I always ask you about the generality of inquiries and the state of this sort of activity elsewhere. And it never gets any less, does it? There's always cases coming out the woodwork, always more and more inquiries taking place. Is there no end to all this?
Doesn't look like it at the moment, does it?
Is there any good come out of any of this?
I think there is some good in that as a society we're more prepared to talk about these things than we were maybe 5 years ago, a decade ago. So that must be a good thing.
So you may become an even more frequent visitor in the next few months.
You never know.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks.